Hi there. This week I'm going to talk you through our 10-step process for what has now become our single most scalable form of link building, digital PR. I'm talking about links from the likes of the BBC, the Telegraph, the Financial Times, Bloomberg, basically the biggest news websites on the planet. And when I say scalable, I really mean scalable. In fact, our most successful story so far was picked up by over 400 journalists. Now, if you equate that to traditional SEO tactics, I reckon you're looking at least 2,000 man-hours, or, in other words, about 250 working days or an entire working year. So this is really, really scalable stuff, and this is how we do it. Step one, we identify our audience. So what do they look like in terms of personality type? Are they people who love detail, in which case we've got to give them tons of it? Or are we talking about people with the attention span of a goldfish with ADHD, in which case we've got to make sure that our headline really packs a punch, and then beyond that it's probably largely about subheadings, bullet points, and some lovely imagery. Secondly, what are their interests and opinions? Because on the one hand, if you can contradict their existing beliefs, their interests, their opinions, etc., you're probably going to catch their eye. But on the other hand, what we always find is that in order to create content that will ultimately get shared online, you need to actually meet with their existing beliefs and expectations, etc. So you've got a bit of a dilemma to answer there. And then finally, where are they active online? Because wherever that is, that's where the press release needs to get distributed. Number two, we need to choose the story and the emotion that it's going to trigger. So without an emotional anchor, there is no story. So we're talking about hope, despair, sadness, humour. What's that emotion? Once we know what it is, we can begin to build the story in our minds. But before we go any further, we need to establish where's the substance, where's the evidence, why are journalists, why is anyone going to treat this seriously? Now that can come from various different places. It could come from statistics. So, for example, you could run surveys, and certainly this is something that we do a great deal through our own our own websites. But if you don't have websites where you can run these really large-scale polls, instead you can use Google Consumer Surveys. That's a really great option. So, alternatively, then, you could have a quote from an authoritative source. Now, taking it to the extreme, we might be talking about a celebrity or a politician, but much more likely is going to be an industry expert, and ideally an industry expert from the client that you're representing. Thirdly, maybe it could be a leaked story. Now, we've found that some of the most powerful stories that we've released over the last 18 months have been leaked stories from large organisations, but these are not necessarily things that you can easily organise. It's more a sort of it occurs more by chance once you've got an existing network within that market. Finally then, there are lots of other ways. So it could be events that you're running, competitions that you're running, maybe an award that you win or a new product that you release. But with each of these options, you've got to ask yourself the question, is this interesting to the broader world? Is it actually interesting to your target audience? Or is it just interesting to you? Because if it's the latter, if it's only interesting to you and your company, you're going to be drowning in a sea of tumbleweed. Number four, your headline. So now we're going to start to build the press release itself. Now with the headline, the approach that we generally take is to come up with initially a short, very, very powerful headline that's then followed by an extension of that headline that gives journalists an insight into what they can expect to read within the story itself. So I'll give you an example. Here we have doctors call for a £50 charge to go to A&E. That's the headline itself, and then underneath that we have an extension of it. A survey of 1,000 UK GPs revealed that 70% of A&E patients are wasting their time, costing the NHS £1 million each year in the process. So that would be the story isn't true by the way, but it would be a great example of a headline and then an extension of the headline that's really going to grab their attention and make them treat it seriously because they can see that it's based on evidence. Number five, so now we're coming onto the body. Now the body of the press release is really just an extension of the points that you've raised in the headline. So it might be that you're going to add in some quotes here, you're going to add in some additional data. You may also add some low file size imagery if you feel that your audience is the kind of audience that's going to need it. Once you've created the body of the press release, you then need to make sure that underneath you've got contact information for the relevant person within your organisation, because you need to make it as simple as possible for journalists to get in touch with that person and get any additional information that they require so they take it seriously and publish it. Number seven, And this is so important from an SEO perspective. Give journalists a reason to link. Right now, the best you can probably hope for is perhaps a citation, a mention of the brand that you're representing. We want more than that. We want a link. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, if you do manage to get a quote from a person within the company, or even just acting on behalf of the company itself, that is going to raise the prominence of the company within the press release and increase the likelihood of a link. But much, much, much better than that is if you can create a corresponding article on the client's website itself. Because then what you're doing is you're giving the journalists a reason to actually send their audience through to your client website for more information. So it might be that you're giving them the full set of data on the website. It might be that you're giving them additional imagery or additional quotes or the full analysis or whatever it may be, but you're actually giving journalists a reason to bother linking to your website. Number 8, create your list and distribute. So you've got a couple of options here. Now we subscribe to a huge and very well maintained global database of journalists, but it is a big investment, and if you're doing this on a smaller scale, what you might prefer to do is to actually cultivate your own list. So you begin by identifying the journalists within your target audience that you want to distribute this to, add them to an Excel spreadsheet, and then over time, as you create additional press releases, what you're going to do is you're going to add a handful of new journalists each time, and of course removing the unresponsive old journalists in the process as well. Number 9, monitoring and follow-up. So now through things like Google Alerts, you're going to monitor the web to see who's picked it up. And the moment that you see it has been picked up, you're going to follow them up. At the very least, you're going to thank the journalists. But if they haven't linked or they haven't given you a citation, you're going to ask them what additional information you could put on your client's website that would encourage them to do so. And finally, number 10, nurture your list. So this is a long-term process. And what you want to be doing is constantly developing that list so that over time you're building a personal relationship with the journalists. And you can even get to the point where you'll ask them in advance, look, you know, Mr. X, if I create this story, will you publish it? And ideally, the absolute holy grail of digital PR is when you get to the stage that in fact they're coming to you because they know that your client is an authority on this particular subject. So that's our 10-step process to sending killer press releases that actually get links. The one barrier you're going to encounter is that every market's that little bit different. So whenever you're working with a new client, it might take 2, 3, 4, 5 efforts to actually arrive at the model that works. And some clients may not have the stomach for that level of upfront investment. But if you can get them to persevere, because once they've found that model, it's going to allow them, whatever size they are, to compete with the biggest brands in the world. So good luck, and I'll see you next time.